Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to this press conference. This morning we have three distinguished guests who will speak on the symposium that we're having in Addis Ababa on the development cooperation and the future of global partnership for development. So the first speaker, and let me introduce the distinguished guests. We have Mr. Ahmed Sideh with us, who is the State Minister of Finance and Economic of Government of Ethiopia. Then we have Mr. Carlos Lopez, who is the Executive Secretary of Economic Commission for Africa. And then Under Secretary General, Mr. Hong Bobu for Economic and Social Affairs from New York. So let me invite them to make short statements, and then we will go to the question and answer session.
Today, we representatives from more than 100 countries have gathered here in Addis Ababa to jointly start the historic moment of defining the development agenda beyond 2015 and the future relationship among countries and a group of countries in advancing the agenda for the well-being of humankind. The topic we have emphasized at this symposium, which is a renewed global partnership for development for the post-2015 development agenda, is a very essential topic as a target and time set of MDGs is ending in 2015, and also as the world is in a state of continuous changes, especially in the development cooperation landscape. The partners felt that it is now time to clearly define and agree in a concrete, actionable and accountable manner on the scope and nature of development cooperation. In a way, this will lead to lift millions of people who live under poverty line and enable them to lead a new and a prosperous life. To this effect, there will be a dialogue on what a renewed global partnership should look like to encourage actions by all stakeholders and to effectively support implementation of goals and targets. Participants will engage in open and frank debates on the potential role, principles and strategic priorities of such a renewed global partnership for development, as well as its key features and working practices and the role of enhanced monitoring and accountability to underpin such a partnership. A number of pre-meetings and side events will allow stakeholders to further deepen their discussions. They will include events for civil society, least developed countries, members of parliament, and the members of steering committee of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. A meetings of Director General of Southern Partners in Development Cooperation will also be convened jointly by UN, UNDESA, and Ethiopia on the afternoon on 7th June 2013. I thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Now let me invite the Executive Secretary for Africa, the Economic Commissioner for Africa, Mr. Carlos Lopez.
Good morning to you all. This meeting is important because we are in the middle of the most important discussion about what is going to happen after 2015 when the current Millennium Development Goals finish. And they finish just in terms of target, but in fact what is behind the idea of the Millennium Development Goals doesn't finish, which is to improve the conditions of the most vulnerable, the poor, making sure that we are in a more equitable world and that it is one that respects the environment regeneration that is needed for us to be able to sustain our efforts in the longer run. The planet is under tremendous pressure, as we know, and people have now forgotten a bit the debate about some of the environmental issues because of the crisis in a number of countries. Fortunately for Africa, we are in a rather good moment in so far as growth is concerned, but we should not be carried away with just the good news about growth. It should be quality growth, a growth that translates into changing people's lives. And that happens when, in fact, you are capable of just addressing the Millennium Development Goals intentions, but also making a more equitable world possible. Now, what is interesting in this discussion is that you are basically witnessing the preparation of a big international negotiation. which is going to be a negotiation to define what is going to be the development agenda in post-2015. And of course, in Africa, we are very interested in this debate because it influences our relationship with the partners outside the continent. And depending on what the orientation of the discussion takes, it can give more weight to Africa's wishes and preoccupations or less. For instance, Africa is very interested in having a discussion about enablers of growth. Enablers of growth are, for instance, access to capital, infrastructure, making sure that industrialization is possible, transformation of the economies is on the top of what we do. It is not sufficient for us just to be saying we are for poverty reduction. We want to transform Africa's economies. We want to make sure that it is going to grow and it's going to be sustainable. Another example of Africa's preoccupations is how we measure progress. Because until now, progress was measured as if the universal targets, let's say reduce poverty by half, were equal in all countries. And we will say this country has met the target, that country has not met the target. But if we are talking about Sweden, reducing poverty in Sweden by half is not the same as reducing poverty by half in Burundi. But we kind of measure them as if it was in the same point of departure. This is a methodological problem that we have to solve with the new agenda. Otherwise, we are measuring things that are not measurable, and we'll keep saying that Africa has not made enough progress. But in fact, Africa has a much bigger terrain to cover, and we have to measure it for the efforts it is making already. And if we just don't think about the target, but about the area, let's say child mortality or maternal mortality or school enrollment, and we see what is the progress that Africa is making, you will see that many countries in Africa are the fastest in recovering the terrain that was to be recovered. But of course, this is not the way the statistics have been put together, and this is one preoccupation that we need to address. So I just gave you two examples, one about contents, the enablers, another about methodologies, the statistics, and the way we deal with them, as examples that Africa has a lot at stake in the discussions about how this universal agenda is defined in the post-2015 era. So this meeting gives an opportunity for consultations before we go into the bigger meeting, which is a development cooperation forum that is going to take place in 2014. And this is sort of the Africa main consultation possibility. So we have this dialogue, and we make sure that the interests of Africa are defended in 2014 in the road to the post-2015. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. Now I invite Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Wu Hongbo, to make a statement.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have just opened an important symposium on shaping the global partnership for development to support the effectiveness of the post-2015 development agenda is our collective aim here in Addis. With less than 3 years left to the final target date of the Millennium Development Goals, our efforts now focus on accelerating progress and addressing gaps in implementation of MDGs. The Global Partnership for Development has played an important role in promoting MDG progress. It has helped to organize trade aid and debt relief, access to ICT and essential medicines, and other support. Yet here too, important gaps still remain. Activities on the global development agenda beyond 2015 are ramping up. Member states and other stakeholders are tasked to develop one unified development agenda. Consultations so far suggested that the post-2015 development agenda should aim at poverty eradication and have sustainable development at its center. We also know that it needs to be underpinned by a strong partnership for development, one that honors existing commitments and one that reflects a changing development landscape. Today's complex global challenges require commitments from all stakeholders if we are to advance sustainable development. A broad and inclusive consultation process will help to build ownership and an active multi-stakeholder engagement. The Ethiopia High-Level Symposium is an important milestone in this direction. We will explore the potential role, principles, and strategic priorities of a renewed global partnership for development. Discussions will also consider the role of monitoring and accountability to underpin such a partnership. Caucus meetings are being organized based on the initiative of least developed countries, civil society organizations, members of parliament, think tanks, and the Pushan Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. And Southern partners in development cooperation are also meeting to discuss the common challenges they face as a diverse group of development actors. This will build on a recent conference held in Delhi, India. Their Southern partners recognize the need for a genuine dialogue driven and supported by the South with the aim of maximizing the impact of South-South cooperation. The Development Cooperation Forum and DCF, a key mechanism of the Economic and Social Council, provides a unique platform for such discussions. It is expected to engage all relevant actors in the inclusive dialogue on the future sustainable development cooperation in the area in the period of post-2015. This current symposium represents the first out of 3 preparatory high-level symposia in preparation for the 2014 Development Cooperation Forum to be held in July 2014 in New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. Now, please identify yourselves before you speak, and I also request you to have very short and concise questions. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Adale. I'm from Addis Standard Magazine. My question is for Mr. Lopez. As we look into the post-2015, countries have achieved a lot in terms of reducing child mortality and enrollment of education and everything, but questions are popping up now. What is all this without human dignity? And this is because there is a huge assumption that these countries, in their rush to achieve the MDGs, are becoming more autocratic, heavy-handed, in terms of not improving themselves in good governance and democratization. Would the post-2015 be looking into issues that the MDG today is missing, democratization and political reform? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We cannot do measurement of what is not in the MDGs right now. The MDGs right now don't have any goal that is related to the issues you have raised, relating to democracy and good governance, etc. But the debate about this possibly being included in the post-2015 is there. There is a high-level panel that was established by the Secretary General, co-chaired by 3 presidents, President of Indonesia, President of Liberia, Madam Johnson Sirleaf, and Prime Minister Cameron of the UK. And this panel has just released last week their report. Basically, the report makes a number of recommendations about what could be the agenda post-2015. And amongst the various recommendations, there are many that relate to issues of democracy, human rights. And this is not yet a document that has been endorsed by any intergovernmental process. It's just a list of proposals that member states now will have to look at. The process is very clear. It is for member states to decide. Sometimes when we talk about the UN, we talk about the UN that we perceive in the media, but the UN is constituted by its members. It is the governments that are going to decide. So starting precisely with meetings like this one, consultations of various kinds, there is a rallying of many possibilities and ideas on how post-2015 could be shaped. And it is too soon to know what is going to be the approval of the member states, but what I can assure you is that these ideas are already being floated.
Mr. Lopez, let me ask Mr. Wu to add something and then we'll invite you.
Well, I agree completely with Mr. Lopez's remarks. I thought it may be useful if I add some information. When we talk about MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, they were goals designed especially for least developed countries or poor countries. Because the international community was not very experienced when they started thinking about MDGs. Now we look back, that many things were missing. The present post-2015 development agenda under consideration by the member states of the United Nations is different in that it will apply not only least developed countries, it will apply to all the countries, developed and developing alike. So this is a fundamental difference. And also, they work on the experiences lesson learned from the past in implementing MDGs. And member states raise a lot of questions. For instance, they would like to have, say, a clause of implementation under each goal. This is something we don't have for MDGs. And they also raised issues as guiding principles of the rule of law and good governance and peace and security. I think Mr. Lopez was right. These issues seem missing in the past, are picked up and being considered by member states. But we don't know yet what will be the final results when we have the single agenda for post-2015 period. This is really member states driven process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. Please go ahead first. Then.
Thank you. This is Muluna from CCTV. My first question, somehow it's answered, but I want you to clear that as you talk about the post-2015 development agenda, are you going to drop the Millennium Development Goal, or are you going to implement it after 2015 or replace it totally? My second question goes to His Excellency Ngopo, UN Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. In your speech, you have proposed a renewed global partnership for better development and shared responsibility. In your view, what the new partnership should look like, and how do you consider the traditional partners of Africa, like China-Africa relationship? And is there any plan from the UN to give additional aid or to facilitate debt relief to selected countries in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me invite Mr. Wu.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad you raised the two questions. First, about the MDGs unfinished. As we know, we are approaching to the deadline of MDG implementation that is September 2015. What we have been discussing with the member states in the United Nations is that the future sustainable development agenda will still have eradication of poverty as one of the cornerstones. Because we have been saying that we have been successful in eradication poverty. The goal was to slash the people living under the poverty line by half. In that sense, we have already fulfilled the target. But people ask this question, what about the other half? We have close to 1 billion people suffering from shortage of food. There are a lot of people who are living under $1.25 poverty line. So there is consensus among all the member states that eradication of poverty will continue to be the cornerstone of the future sustainable development agenda. And other unfinished business, for instance, sanitation facilities and reducing the number of city slum squatters, these will continue to be concerns in the future sustainable development agenda. It is not a matter of succeeding, but they will include some of the unfinished business. However, the idea we have in mind will be much larger. For instance, the food. The food issue varies from country to country. When we talk about food, we can say food for all. But this concept does not apply each country. For instance, when we say food for United States or for Germany, it does not have the significance because they have already enough food. But food for other countries which are relatively developed, they successfully solve the problem of providing food to their own people. But for some other countries, shortage of food is a real problem. So you can see the situation is quite different. But the food-related issue is quite different. For instance, when we talk about food, how about to save food? Do not waste food. I'll give you an example. The countries in the sub-Saharan area, they produce 230 million tons of food every year. Do you know how much food wasted in developed countries on a yearly basis? 220 million tons. So this is not sustainable. And the umbrella food, we should do something. So to put it in short, that eradication of poverty will continue to be the main content of the future sustainable development agenda. And about the global partnership, this is something we have been discussing within the present symposium. Why that is important? We understand the member states are discussing the goals. Once you have the goals, where's the money? If there's no money, how can you implement the goals? So according to the outcome document of Rio Plus 20, which took place last year, there will be a committee of 30 financial experts to be established in the United Nations. They will be responsible for designing financing strategies for future development. We in the Development Cooperation Forum and the current symposium will do the stock taking and brainstorming to see how we can renew the partnership. How can we make the partnership for development more effective? The outcome will become meaningful, significant, and solid inputs for deliberation in the intergovernmental process in the United Nations. And I think people are fully aware that today's economic landscape has been dramatically changed with some new developments. For example, South-South cooperation is playing increasingly important role in developing economies. For instance, I understand China and Ethiopia have a lot of projects together. Some are very successful. This year and this time, we have directors general from the southern countries. They are going to discuss how the South-South cooperation could facilitate the future sustainable development agenda, and what kind of role they will play. However, some ideas emerging from the discussion so far. South-South cooperation is going to play increasingly important role in the future. However, in terms of its nature, it's poor country helping poor country on the voluntary basis. This is very different from North-South cooperation. And the second idea that emerged from discussion is that South and North cooperation, the South-South cooperation, they could supplement each other, complement each other. They could build a bridge. They would not duplicate each other's obligations, but they can complement each other's roles. This is something we are trying to bring into reality. And there are a lot of useful ideas were actually put forward for discussions. And this is a difference from what we have been talking about, the traditional concept of a global compact or global partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Addis from Capital Newspaper. My question goes to our State Minister Ahmed. I would be very glad if you could tell me what was the problem that Ethiopia wasn't able to meet the MDGs, at least a few of them, because many people say that, for example, child mortality. Of course, in health sector, Ethiopia has registered a lot of achievements, but still child mortality and sanitation, Ethiopia is not going to meet the MDGs. What was lacking to achieve that, and what are you dreaming to be included in the post-2015 agendas? Thank you.
I think Ethiopia, everybody knows that the last decade, the economy of Ethiopia has fundamentally shifted in terms of its growth trajectory for what it has been in the past, and as a result of that, there has been a double-digit growth consistently for the last decade, and as a result of that, there is significant expansion in infrastructure and services in the whole country, and there has been significant job creation and human development outcome out of all that exercise. In terms of MDG achievement, Ethiopia is on the right track to achieve most of the MDG goals, on having poverty as well as all the other MDG goals. And we have challenges in a very few areas of MDG goals, particularly on mother's mortality and child health issues. And that one also, the nation is doubling its effort now recently to modernize its health service. And particularly the issue is not only health service coverage expansion, it's also mindset of the people to use the facilities. Therefore, we are deploying now a lot of health extension workers in all over the country, and also sensitize all different types of government and civil society organizations to work on that, so that people's ability and consciousness to use the facilities that government is building is very much important. Therefore, we are going to work it, and I'm sure we will try our best to meet also that goal within the remaining 2 years' time. In terms of what Ethiopia is willing to be the outcome document of this whole exercise, is that Ethiopia, as what Lopez has already said, is what the position of Ethiopia is, that fundamentally what we are looking, poverty reduction is fundamental, but we need to have comprehensive growth enabling environment. Therefore, the whole renewed partnership should involve not only traditional development relationship, but trade, investment, technology transfer, so that LDCs can have a meaningful space of policies, as well as enabling environment to enable them to modernize their economies, to transform their economies, to industrialize. Therefore, all issue has to be addressed comprehensively together. The enabling environment is very important, and I think we are building collectively that voice, and we will continue to carry out that voice, because a sustainable, transformative development needs also support not only on traditional development cooperation, but also on trade, investment, and enabling environment for the whole transformation and industrialization and transformation to be achieved. And for this, we need also a policy space to exercise our own policies, which is based on successful experience. I thank you.
My name is Getachew, resident correspondent of Deutsche Welle, the Voice of Germany, in Amharic and the French language. So, excuse me, I would like to ask Mr. Lopez in French. Monsieur Lopez, vous avez tout à l'heure évoqué, vos collègues aussi, sur les questions des pays en développement et que vous avez qualifié de vulnérables. Mais on sait que les pays, par exemple, en développement, les pays les moins avancés, se prêtent concurrents sur le marché international au lieu de former un bloc. Et est-ce que cette prise de conscience est là? Est-ce qu'ils ont dressé aussi une stratégie pour enfin résoudre ce problème qui est chronique depuis des décennies?
So Lopez, may I request you to also explain the question in English, because many people in the room could not understand before answering it. Thank you.
The question is about least developed countries and how we can assure, based on the intervention I made at the opening, how we can assure that these countries get out of this situation where they are treated as a bloc and developments are not as effective as they should be. What I would like to say is that there is a shift of mentalities in the LDCs that is quite important for us to take notice. For a long time, LDCs were fighting to stay LDCs because this would give them access to official development assistance, ODA. And all projects and strategies that you could find in these different countries were geared towards taking advantage of ODA, and most of the discussions they were engaging with the external partners were about how they were going to use ODA, and the debate was about development effectiveness. Now, what I'm noticing is a complete mindset change where most of the leaders, and this is tangible, you can go country after country, having plans to graduate their countries by year X. They want to become middle-income countries. And they will say our strategy is to become a middle-income country by 2025 or 2030, 2035. And almost all countries are moving in this direction, the LDCs, which basically means the international community has to take notice that there is a shift on the agenda. The agenda now is to graduate. The agenda is no longer just to stay aid dependent. And I think this is a very important element for the discussion post 2015, because it's going to be the element that will allow us to look into what exactly is vulnerability. And there are different types of measuring vulnerability. Normally we have associated it to poverty, and to the fact that people didn't have access to basic social services or social protection. And in some cases, when the climate change debate kicked in, also the exposure to weather extreme conditions, particularly the least developed countries that are also small island development states. And I think it's now important for us to define vulnerability in a much more sophisticated way than what it was. Vulnerability now should be creating the conditions for the countries to have the opportunity of transformation. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that if we are going to make sure that the composition of GDP to be very economical on the words and being very economist on the content, if we want to change the composition of GDP, we are talking about real structural transformation of the countries. And if we are going in that direction, it basically means that for countries that are coming from a very low point, they have problems of capacity, access to technology, financing. They have also difficulties in maintaining infrastructure, social and otherwise. And these are vulnerabilities for them to be able to transform. And I think this is a much more interesting and important concept than just, tackling people with aid dependency, and they never get out of the poverty trap, because you just take care of distributing some food, making sure that people are vaccinated, but the basics, not about transforming their social lives and transforming their countries.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. If there are no more questions, we would like to thank you for your presence and your engagement with this symposium. Thank you so much. Bye.